guys to bring that now to the regular season?
I think the only thing that will stop us is us. As long as we run the calls that sports gets out there, we're all on the same page. I think the sky's the limit.
Let's face it, last year in the 2024 NFL season, the Cleveland Browns were absolute
shite,
having a 3-14 record after the season before in 2023, having an 11-6 record. I mean, that's literally an 8-game drop-off. But for this second NFL season preview in the AFC North, I want to talk about the Cleveland Browns and ask the question if they can survive the AFC North, because I think it's going to be a long season for them. I say that the Cleveland Browns last year, they had the 10th rank in opponents' points scored per game, the 19th total defense, and they're 27th in total defensive rank. So that's all over the place, but overall, ranking as a 27th ranked defense, that's not something that's trending upwards. When you look at the season that they had in 2023, when they made the playoffs and lost to the Texans in the wild card, they finished number 1 in overall total defense yards allowed, and they ranked number 2 in total passing yards allowed, alongside of that ranking number 3 in the league in opponent points per game and 10th overall in points allowed. That's a dramatic difference between 2023 and 2024, and those lower stats of being the 27th ranked defense in the league last year resulted in them having a 3-14 record, and really at first having the 2nd overall pick before trading the 2025 NFL draft with the Jacksonville Jaguars to have the 5th pick. But I do believe that this year can be similar in terms of from a defensive standpoint with the Cleveland Browns, because of some of the personnel they've added, alongside with keeping and retaining Myles Garrett, who they extended to a 4-year $160 million contract with $123.5 million guaranteed, making $40 million per year, a deal that he signed in March after at first requesting a trade. But those money signs start to pile up, and sometimes they become more important than wins. Not saying that's the same thing for Micah Parsons, but I'm not even saying that's a scenario for Myles Garrett, but that was a stark difference in terms of requesting a trade around the Super Bowl area, and then like 4 weeks later signing this huge contract extension. Do they have enough offensively? Defensively, I think that they can have enough to compete. I mean, you have Myles Garrett, who has had 14 sacks in 2024 and 2023, 16 both in 2021 and 2022, and in 12 in 2020. I mean, he's one of the most consistent players and defensive ends that we've seen in NFL history, and I would say probably with him and TJ Watt, then Micah Parsons around that area too, alongside the Trey Hendrickson, Max Crosby, being the best defensive ends in the league. But besides him defensively, Denzel Ward also there. A player who I love that they drafted in Mason Graham with the 5th overall pick, who I'll elaborate on a little bit more, and other fixtures of that nature too, in that Jim Schwartz defensive scheme, which I believe is one of the best in the league. I wonder how competitive this team will actually be this year with Joe Flacco in a second stint as the Cleveland Browns quarterback. We know what he did with them a couple of seasons ago in the 5 games that he played at the end of the season to help push the Browns into the playoffs. He had a little over 1,600 passing yards with 13 touchdowns and 8 interceptions with a passer rating of 90.2, winning comeback player of the year. But I just believe that after the performance that he had last year with the Indianapolis Colts, which also, if you look at those numbers, it's kind of similar to the Browns numbers, but he was also very inefficient. 24, where he ended up taking the starting job from Anthony Richardson, but ultimately Flacco ended up getting back benched, and Richardson came back to be the starter of the Indianapolis Colts. In those 8 games last year with the Colts, he had a little over 1,700 passing yards, threw for 12 passing touchdowns and 7 interceptions with a 50 QBR. I believe that's another reason why y'all probably questioning why I have Shedeur Sanders in the thumbnail. That's because I believe him and Dylan Gabriel should be playing the most this year. It's no disrespect to Joe Flacco. He's had a successful career, won a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens. But in my opinion, they should let the rookies in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders see what you have, because if you can catch lightning in a bottle, for example, having a quarterback like a Brock Purdy, who I think Shedeur could play similarly to if he stops trying to do things off schedule and really complicate and take sacks, causing a lot of TFLs, things of that nature, too, and putting the Browns in different situations like we saw in his preseason game against the Rams. If he can be more smart of a quarterback, or if Dylan Gabriel can be more on schedule with his throws and be precise and not look like an undersized quarterback, the Browns could potentially have a late round quarterback on a rookie deal to be competitive alongside of a complementary defense to compete in their division in the AFC North, but also be a fixture as a wild card team in the AFC going forward. But that's a long shot there, I would say. But for me, starting Joe Flacco is just putting off the inevitable. And I know the Browns now, they have 2 first-round picks in next year's 2026 draft, so they can see potentially who they want to draft, or they can use both of those picks to package and try to get the number 1 pick next year, depending on how bad they are and how bad Jacksonville is. It depends on that for sure as well. But if you end up having a guy at quarterback, whether it's Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel, who can prove to be something whenever you inevitably, in my opinion, end up benching Joe Flacco, who is going to be a game manager for sure, but he's not going to be able to push the needle in terms of making this team an actual contender. If you start one of those quarterbacks quarterbacks and you're able to get something special, that could be a beautiful thing, because now if you have your potential quarterback of the future going into his second year on a rookie deal, you can use both of those picks to maybe draft and get a great skill player, or you can use both of those picks to trade up and get a great skill player and maybe get the #1 pick and draft one of the best potential receivers in the draft, or another piece that you can add to your defense. Or you can draft 2 great offensive players depending on how bad the Jaguars are, and even the Browns if they have a bad season. But if you see Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel playing great in their rookie year despite the team success not being there, it could end up being an ideal situation for the Browns, having great draft capital and having some hope for the future, because they haven't had that in a while. Them not having hope in the future isn't an indictment on Kevin Stefanski. He's literally won Coach of the Year twice in his 5 seasons as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and he's going into his 6th year this season, and he's led the Cleveland Browns to making the playoffs twice. I think there's not an indictment on him because he's done an amazing job. Before Stefanski got to the Cleveland Browns, the one time the Cleveland Browns made the playoffs before 2020 was in the 2002 season. They went 18 years without being frankly relevant and making it to the playoffs. 02 was when I was born. That's a long time, guys. So, and I'm not saying I'm old, but you know what I mean. But that shows and paints the picture of how bad and in limbo the Cleveland Browns were leading up till Kevin Stefanski was hired in 2020, and what he's been able to do despite having some teams that really have frankly not been great at all. But with that being said though, guys, before we get further into this Cleveland Browns season preview, talking about if they can survive in the AFC North, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram/Twitter and X at SwaggyRuss, and TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for shorts, reels, a lot of content and things of that nature. This is the halfway mark of the AFC North videos. We have 2 more in this series before the NFL season starts, which will be amazing. After this Cleveland Browns season preview, we'll be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and then moving on to the Baltimore Ravens. Like I said, guys, stay tuned for these weekly NFL recaps that I'll be having every single week up until after the Super Bowl, and it's going to be a great time. In this series for previewing every single NFL team has been amazing, so stay tuned for a lot more content, guys, coming about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, and all stuff like that. But with that being said, let's talk about if the Cleveland Browns can survive the AFC North in the 2025 NFL season. A little bit earlier, I talked about how the Cleveland Browns before Kevin Stefanski only made the playoffs 1 time before 2020. Well, look at this stat. Up until the end of the 2024 season, since 1999, the Cleveland Browns have had a total of 40 different quarterbacks start a game. No consistency, the definition of a revolving door at that position, and it kind of sucks as well too, because after moving on from Baker Mayfield, you thought that you had a guy in Deshaun Watson who you traded for before the 2022 season, signing a 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed deal with Deshaun Watson to the Browns. You thought that was going to be your savior in the franchise, and we saw how he laid an egg, not only being suspended for his first year and missing games in 2023, but last year, how it started before he tore his Achilles. It was a definition of putrid. Leading up to that Week 7 matchup when Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles against the Cincinnati Bengals, which, again, I hate to remind everyone of this, but the Cleveland Browns fans who were cheering for Deshaun Watson getting injured, that's just so classless. But anyways, I don't want to talk about that too much because that's just a gross thing in itself. Seeing athletes get injured, these guys put everything on the line to sacrifice their bodies to play a game that we love. But with that being said though, guys, before Deshaun Watson got injured last year, he only completed 63% of his passes for a little over 1,100 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Very pedestrian, had a passer rating of 79. That was a very pedestrian stat line for 7 games played, and they were 1-6 when he started. That just doesn't cut it at all, and I know he won't be playing this year, and that's why they have the situation that they're in right now, starting a Joe Flacco and then having Dylan Gabriel at quarterback 2 and Shedeur Sanders at quarterback 3. But it just goes to show how the Cleveland Browns, I don't really believe in cursed and stuff like that too, but if I did, I would certainly say that they are that, because 40 starting quarterbacks in 25 years, I mean, like, dude, that is awful. That's just why another reason I continue to stress that starting either Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel actually pretty quickly soon during the season. Maybe Joe Flacco played 3 to 4 games and then you should move on to one of them, in my opinion. I think that's a stance that the Browns should take, because yeah, you can say that Joe Flacco gives them the best chance to win, but when we talk about their schedule in a few, when are you going to start winning? Because 2 games they're playing against divisional opponents in the AFC North with the Bengals and the Ravens, and then in week 3 they play the Packers, and week 4 they play the Lions. So when are you going to start winning? I probably predict you're going to be 0-4 or 1-3 in that stretch. And if they were to win one of those games, I would say it's probably against the Bengals, just because we've seen how the Bengals have started, but they tried to change things up with playing Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Joe Burrow in the preseason. So we'll see about that. But you can be 0-4 after the first 4 weeks. So that just kills the argument, in my opinion, for lobbying for a Joe Flacco to start. It is probably irrelevant to talk about the stat lines that a Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders had in college, but I think it's a valid thing to say that, for example, Dylan Gabriel, he played 6 seasons in college throughout his time at UCF, Oklahoma, and Oregon, and then the Shedeur Sanders, he played 4 total years of college, with 2 at Jackson State and then 2 at Colorado. So these quarterbacks, similarly to some of the quarterbacks that we've seen thrive in the NFL in recent years, they have that experience, but unlike these quarterbacks who have thrived in the first round being drafted like a CJ Stroud, a Jaden Daniels, two of those having the greatest rookie seasons as we've seen at the quarterback position in the NFL. And then even a Bo Nix, who had 29 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions in his rookie year and helped get the Broncos to the playoffs. Those three quarterbacks, they were drafted in the first round. Shedeur was drafted in the 5th, and Dylan Gabriel was drafted in the 3rd round. The conversation is exhausting. It's been going on since the draft happened in April. We all know that Shedeur Sanders was arguably a late 1st round to 2nd round draft talent. Him slipping to the 5th round made no sense. But ultimately, that's where reality faced. And for Shedeur and Dylan Gabriel, it's for them to prove why they should be starting over Joe Flacco, like I think. I just think that because, like I said, the narrative about Joe Flacco giving them the best chance to win is nullified, in my opinion, based on their schedule alone. But before getting into their schedule, though, I do want to talk about some of their key personnel that'll be implemented this season offensively and defensively. And I love what they did in the draft in terms of drafting a Mason Graham on the defensive line at the defensive tackle position to complement a player like a Myles Garrett on that line. Had 45 tackles last season with 7 TFLs and 3.5 sacks. And then in 2023 with Michigan, when they won a national championship, he had 36 tackles that season with 8 TFLs and 3 sacks. This guy's very disruptive on the line. In the running game, can improve a little bit more, but he certainly can get to the passer and pressures at a high level. And I think that that's a guy that is going to be able to be a great foundational piece for that defense going forward, even beyond the 2025 season. I like that pick. Then also in the 2nd round, they drafted Carson Schlesinger from UCLA. I think that he has a chance to be one of the best linebackers from this draft class. He was the first pick of the 2nd round. Last year, he had 136 total tackles and 90 solo tackles, 9 TFLs and 4 sacks. He plays like a guy on fire defensively, and I think that he's perfect for that Jim Schwartz system that can add another player, help this defense be even more dominant, because they're going to need to, because like I said, I don't really see a lot happening from their offense. But Schlesinger in 2023, he had some pedestrian stats. I mean, his first 2 years, and mind you, he was a walk-on at UCLA. It's just really a testament to his story, because last year it was so spectacular what he was able to do, and he was nearly a 1st round pick in this year's draft. So credit to Schlesinger for the type of player that he was at UCLA in his final season there, and the type of player that he can be ultimately with the Cleveland Browns in this 2025 NFL season to help bolster their defense even more. Offensively, as we know, they drafted Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel respectively in the draft, but offensively, I also like what they did from a running back standpoint in a running back rich class, which saw 26 running backs get drafted. They scooped 2 after moving on and departing from Nick Chubb, who's now with the Houston Texans. They drafted Sean Judkins 3 picks after drafting Carson Schlesinger with the 36th pick overall of the 2nd round of the draft. And last year, we saw how dominant he was, being one of the key elements and weapons for Ohio State, winning the national championship, having 194 carries for 1,060 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns, alongside of having 22 receptions for 161 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Just a back who's going to be very complimentary with Dylan Sampson, but the only thing about Quinshon Judkins is that whole legal thing that happened off the field. I'm not going to get specifically into it about when he'll potentially play. Will he play in week 1? But with Dylan Sampson, though, also being there, the running back from Tennessee that they drafted in the 4th round, he had one of the best collegiate seasons last year at the running back position, having 258 carries for just a little shy of 1,500 rushing yards, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry and 22 rushing touchdowns. I think having a 2-back system between Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson is going to be perfect for this offense to alleviate some pressure for Joe Flacco to start. But like I said, potentially when we see Dylan Gabriel on the field or when Shedeur Sanders also plays, so that'll be a perfect match to have those 2 running backs splitting carries. Weapon perspective, though, last year offensively, I think it goes without saying that Jerry Jeudy was the best player for them on the offensive side last year, having 90 receptions for a little over 1,200 receiving yards, averaging nearly 14 yards per reception and 4 receiving touchdowns. That was a great thing for him, having his first 1,000-yard season after spending 4 years with the Denver Broncos, where things definitely went below expectation for him, as he was drafted in the 1st round of the 2020 draft, while being drafted over players like a CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. Those 2 receivers alone being the top 3 receivers in the league, alongside of a Jamar Chase. Jerry Jeudy was drafted before both of them, being the 2nd receiver taken after Henry Ruggs, and we all know how things happen with Ruggs, but praying that he's getting his stuff around. But with Jeudy, he was expected to be a guy that has the potential to be one of the best receivers in the league, and I think last year with his first season in Cleveland, he built on that, and he'll be a great weapon for whoever's starting at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns this year. But alongside of him having a David Njoku, one of the better tight ends in the league as well, him having 64 receptions last year for 505 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns. But in 2023, when they made the playoffs, having an 11-6 record, that was his best season in the league, as he had 81 receptions for 882 receiving yards, averaging essentially 11 yards per reception and 6 receiving touchdowns. So this offense, they have some pieces, but last year they had a severely ravished offensive line that dealt with a lot of injuries. And then going into 2025, PFF projects their offensive line the 27th ranked offensive line this year. So it's going to be trouble, especially playing against teams that they are in this upcoming season. And they also have the 13th toughest schedule in the league, so things won't be easy. See how improved or how complacent or how worse their offensive line will be in 2025. 2025 because, like I said, they do not necessarily have one of the easier schedules in the league this year. So specifically talking about that schedule, I mentioned earlier, they play the Bengals in week 1, the Ravens in week 2. Weeks 3 and 4, they play 2 NFC North opponents playing the Packers and then the Lions. Not an easy stretch at all. Like I said, if I had to be realistic and predict, I think they're going to be 0-4 after that stretch. No disrespect. And then after that, in week 5, they play against the Minnesota Vikings. Things will not be easy at all. Week 6, they play the Steelers. Week 7, the Dolphins. And week 8, they'll be playing against the New England Patriots on the road. So those are 5 teams that made the playoffs in the 2024 season that the Browns will be seeing before their bye week. And overall in that stretch, I think that's a potential of essentially every opponent, 7 to 8 teams that can make the playoffs in this 2025 season before the bye for the Browns. So that's going to be a hard stretch. Those 8 games, I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns were like 1-7 or 2-6, something like that. Their season will already be looking to be cooked at that point. Coming off of the bye in week 10, you'll be playing against the New York Jets. That's winnable, but I don't know if the Jets are going to be super trash. I can see them being like around a 7-10 type of team. So, I mean, that could be a loss for the Browns as well. Then they play against the Ravens for a second time in week 11. The Raiders in week 12. Week 13 playing against the 49ers. The Titans in week 14. Bears, and then facing the Bills in week 16. The Steelers again for a second time in week 17. And then lastly finishing off with a team they opened the season with on the road this time though in week 18 against the Bengals. With them playing a total of 6 teams that made the playoffs last year, with 2 of those teams in their own division, and potentially they can have 3 teams in the AFC North, as we've seen that division before, which is arguably the best in the NFL. I think it's going to be a long and rough season again for this Browns team. I mean, where do y'all see wins at easily? For me, besides games against the Jets, the Titans, maybe they can win 1 divisional game, but I wouldn't surprise if they win none. I mean, they did win 2 games in the AFC North last year as they beat the Ravens and the Steelers, but I'm not sure if I see that happening again. If the defense can be very disruptive and create turnovers and create short fields for the offense, possibly so, but for me, I don't see the Browns being better than a 4-5 win team this upcoming season, and that'll be perfect for them in terms of a draft capital standpoint, having their top pick and then potentially the Jaguars if they're bad or mid, or if they're mid, that won't help them at all, but if they're bad, then they'll have 2 potential top picks. That'll help them, but from a competitive standpoint, I think it's gonna be a long season and a season of why we initially saw Myles Garrett request a trade, but like I said, he ended up getting that $40 million per year and ended up wanting to stay. But I don't think that's gonna be a team that's gonna be competitive and be a AFC playoff contender this year or have a chance to really do something great or special. And it'll probably potentially cause questions about Kevin Stefanski, but like I mentioned, he's a 2-time coach of the year. I just think that this team from an offensive standpoint, really specifically, because I think their defense can hold things down, I just don't see them being great this year or being a team that can be improved dramatically to have an 8-9 record or being a 7-10 type of team to have some momentum going into the 2026 season. But I could be proven wrong with that type of stance. Like I said, the best case scenario for this Browns team is for them to find their franchise quarterback in Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel, to then be able to acquiesce the draft capital that they have next year to draft some more players to help their team be competitive and sign some key free agents and potentially have an improved 2026 season. But I just think they've been dealt a tough hand in this 2025 year based on their schedule and based on their offense not truly right now appearing to have a guy that they start off with at the quarterback position that can lead to real success. In the comments down below, do you think that the Cleveland Browns can survive the AFC North in 2025? Am I being too hard on Joe Flacco, thinking that he's just a game manager and that he's going to end up collapsing potentially? That's no disrespect to him. He's had a solid career, like I've said, but I just think at this point, at 40 years old, how much is he going to push the needle? And I think that they should give Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders a shot to really see what they have in a potential franchise quarterback. But do y'all think that the Cleveland Browns can survive the AFC North? They still have Myles Garrett on the defensive side. They've added weapons like Mason Graham, Carson Schwarzenegger defensively too. They still have Denzel Ward, one of the best cornerbacks in the league. But how do you see the Cleveland Browns performing in this 2025 NFL season? I want to hear what y'all think and give me y'all best takes, because I know it'll probably be controversial to a lot of people and especially Browns fans, but to me, I don't see them having a lot of success this year, respectively. That's the second video in this AFC North. Like I said, stay tuned for videos on the Bengals and the Ravens soon. And man, we're almost here. The 2025 NFL season starting. I'm so excited, guys, to see this Cowboys-Eagles game, but also the slate that we have on Sunday to see those games out in full action, man. It's been a long wait, but it's been so worth it, guys. We are here in September, and this is an amazing time to be alive, guys. And yeah, the 2025 NFL season is going to be great, and it's going to culminate in February. We'll be seeing Super Bowl 60 in Santa Clara. I wonder who will be in that matchup. Only time will tell. Make sure that you guys hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me, like I always say, on Instagram / Twitter and X at SwaggyRuss and TikTok at SwaggyRuss02. A lot more on the way. NFL weekly recaps, potential NBA team previews coming too as well in the next month as that season starts. A lot of great things on the way, guys. And I just appreciate all the support the channel has been doing lately, and I just give God all the glory, guys. So stay tuned for a lot that we have coming for sure. sir. Keep Jesus Christ at the center of your lives always, guys. Know that he loves you and has great purpose for you always. And make sure you encourage each other and lift each other up. Lead each other towards Christ, not towards sin. And just know that you have purpose. You are legendary and you are awesome. I love you guys always. Y'all keep being blessed. Y'all have a good one. Peace.